Hi everybody, welcome to the Research Methods class for Sophia University. My name is Dr. Ryan Rominger, and most of you probably met me already at this global seminar when we had our seminar. If some of you are new to the class and did not meet at the seminar, please email me, let me know that you're going to be in the class, and you might want to make sure to review the syllabus in detail because we went over that at the seminar. All right. Well, this week, week one, I want to give you a general introduction to research methods and let you know what we're going to be covering this week. And not just this week, but the rest of the class. So this class has, every week there are weekly readings, and the readings will cover a particular research method in general. And then I will also have readings that are either a case or cases using that research method, or a published article that uses that particular research method. And then you can see how that research method has been applied in a real life application. And it's basically used to demonstrate the execution of that method, and also demonstrate to you so that in case you want to see what the output is for your own dissertation, because I know you're all probably thinking about your own research methods that you might use for your own dissertation research. So in addition to the weekly readings, we're going to have a weekly research method discussion on Canvas. So you'll do your readings ahead of time, and then we're going to hold the discussions in the Canvas system in a discussion forum. So each week, starting particularly in week 2 forward, you're going to have questions that are specific to that research method, and if you have any questions for me, you can post them there, and we'll discuss different things about that research method, the history and philosophy behind it, if we get into that amount of detail, or any particular questions that you might have about the readings about that method. So for the weekly research method discussion, I want to make sure that you post your initial post, your first post, on the discussion forums by Wednesday evening. And what that does is it allows all of us to then have a discussion throughout the rest of the week around those questions that come up or posts that you post online. And then, so you do your initial post by Wednesday, and then by Saturday evening you should have posted at least twice more in response to the other students around the research method discussion in that discussion forum for each week. So we have the weekly readings, the weekly research method discussion, and there's also a weekly assignment. So the assignment is that you will do a write-up on the article or case reading. And that article case analysis will include a short description of the topic, just a few sentences, a detailed description of the research method used, including the specific method, research question, and basic results, and then a critique of the method listing at least 2 pros and 2 cons of that particular method that you might be able to think of. Often the authors of the case or the article will say what some of the pros and cons are, particularly limitations and sections. And then finally a description of how you would use this method in the study with your own interests. For example, you can then apply that research method if we're talking about phenomenology. How would you set up a phenomenology case very briefly? How would you set that up for a particular topic that you're interested in studying? So these weekly assignments are to be emailed to me by the Friday of that week. So for week 2's assignment, you want to email that to me on the week 2 Friday, the second Friday of classes. All right, if there's any questions about that, please do give me a call or send me an email. So in addition to the weekly assignments, the readings, the discussion forum, and the article analysis, this weekly assignment, we have a final paper. The final paper is for you to create a prospectus or a short proposal of a study, and it doesn't need to be the study that you're planning for your dissertation, but if it is, that's fine. You can do that. You can use this class to start honing that research question and thinking about what type of method you'd use for your own research. But it doesn't have to be. I really encourage you playing with the research methods and coming up with new ideas about different ways you might address different topics. For me, using research methods and applying research methods is a time of playfulness and seeing how these tools can be used in a variety of different ways. So you'll be asked to write up in a concise manner your topic that you would choose, the problem or opportunity for the research, stating the specific research question you would have, and describing the research method you would use and tell why this method would be appropriate. And be specific in this section, including your procedure, what you would use with your participants, the step-by-step practice you would use with the participants after you recruited those participants. We'll talk more about this, the prospectus, but this is, again, also some of this information is in the syllabus, so make sure to go back to the syllabus if you have questions. And as it gets closer, we'll talk more about it. The particular methods that I would expect you to use would be the ones that we're discussing in class. However, if you do have a research method that is different than the ones we're discussing in class, email me and we can talk about using that. I just want to make sure that you know the method well enough to be able to apply it for this final paper. And that final paper is due the Friday of week 9, which is the last day of class. All right. So the class itself, in addition to the above weekly assignments and the final paper, I want to set up 2 phone meetings with each student. The first phone meeting in the first half of class and the second phone meeting in the second half of class. And the reason I want to do this is not only just to stay connected to you as students, as an up, and help you develop your understanding of the research methods and see if there are any ways that I might be able to help you learn the research methods in a better way. We can also talk about your dissertation topics and particular research methods that might be used for a particular topic. Really, it comes down to what the research question is. What is it that you want to do? How do you want to approach your topic? A lot of that is going to determine what method you use. But anyway, we can start brainstorming different ideas and different ways that you could approach different topics. The phone sessions can be 30 to 60 minutes. And just email me and let me know when you will have times available so that we can start setting those up once we get the class rolling. So the readings for week 1, now that we've covered the class in general, delving specifically into week 1, which is this week. The readings for this week come from a text called Understanding Research Methods, an overview of the essentials. It's essentially section 1. There's lots of good definitions. This is really an overview, which many of you probably already have this content coming from undergrad. So now that you're in a graduate program, we want to do a quick review of this. What are variables? What are operational definitions? What does it mean to have an empirical research, experimental versus non-experimental research, those types of things. And the reason I'm giving this overview is so that you have that base and you're reminded of that base of language as we move forward through the rest of the class, because those terms you're going to be expected to understand and be able to use and apply throughout the rest of the class. The next reading for this week, week 1, is from the Wiley-Blackwell Handbook, and this is the one text I asked you to buy for the class. It's chapter 13 is the one we're going to start off reading, and this is essentially an introduction to transpersonal research in particular. For this week 1, the first several pages of that are of the most interest because they cover quantitative and qualitative and mixed method research in a general way, and then it launches you into discussion of intuitive inquiry, integral inquiry, etc. So take a look at that, read through that for our week 1 as well. And finally, there's an overview that Bahman Shirazi has written up. He was a prior instructor of this course and teaches at CIS and whatnot. So that's a Word document. He also offers a unique perspective, his own perspective for combining different research methods in a very integral and pragmatic way. So I find his perspective on that very interesting. He also covers things like the difference between idiographic and nomothetic research, which is very nice. I'm going to discuss that a little bit here. And difference between quantitative and qualitative and all that. So, great. Well, enjoy the readings. I hope that that you like these for this week, and this is a good starter for us. The week 1 assignment. Normally, for all other weeks, we're going to be focusing on a particular case or article for the assignment using a specific method. But this week, for your writing assignment, what I'd like you to do instead, because we're starting off and we're kind of looking at the overview, I'd like you to write about this. Prior to this class, what has been your experience with quantitative and qualitative research methods? Now, having read the text for this week, name and define 5 things which were either new to you or which you feel are particularly important. So what was your prior experience? And then name and define 5 things from your readings. So that'll help kick us off for your week 1 assignment. And remember, those are supposed to be emailed to me by the Friday of this coming week. All right, for this week, a quick overview. Qualitative research, quantitative research, and mixed method. Qualitative research, if you will remember, is research that is rich in description, often uses interviews or surveys to collect written or textual data. If there's an interview, that interview is often going to be transcribed, and then you're going to be working with the textual transcriptions and coding those transcriptions in order to find themes and draw out description of different experiences that people have had. The focus is often on rich description and exploration of a particular experience. Often qualitative research focuses on the numbers are fewer, the participant numbers are fewer, so there's fewer people that are the focus rather than large numbers. Sometimes, though, you will find qualitative research which gets up to 30 or even 50 individuals. It can go higher. The main point with qualitative research, though, is that it is analyzing a particular type of data, the interview and textual, sometimes art, and the tool of analysis is most often the interviewer coming from their own particular experience. Sometimes the interviewer or the researcher will bracket their experience and try and set aside their own beliefs prior to working with the data, and sometimes they will integrate their beliefs and acknowledge their beliefs and their perspective they're coming from when they do their analysis. So there's a couple different ways to do that. When we get into the specific methods, we'll talk about that a bit more. Sometimes qualitative research is called idiographic research. Again, fewer numbers, focusing on rich description of an experience. And the focus here is not in comparison between people, but really describing an experience and getting into an experience and unfolding that in the richest way possible, so that we can find out more about a particular type of experience or process or whatnot. So that's qualitative research. Quantitative research deals with often larger numbers, most often larger numbers. It's really strong quantitative research. You would be getting into maybe the hundreds, 50 to 100. Sometimes you'll have quantitative that's down as low as 30, but really you want to have larger numbers for a stronger study. Because the goal for quantitative research is a comparison of groups. So you give a particular group a measure, an assessment, and you get a group score for that particular study. And then you have another group that you might be comparing against. Or you might have one group that you're comparing before they have an experience and then afterwards. And then that experience is often called a treatment phase. So, but again, the comparison is of the group to the group. There are other types of statistical analysis that can be done, but I'm just trying to speak in generalities here. Quantitative research is focused on numbers, not the thick, rich description. It's another focus of quantitative research is, if it's done well, then you assume that whatever findings you have about a particular group of participants, that you can then generalize the findings to a larger population or subpopulation. So for example, if you do a study with Alzheimer's patients, then you assume that, let's say you work with 100 Alzheimer's patients, and you come up with some finding. You assume that that finding can then generalize to a majority of Alzheimer's patients. Or not. Sometimes there are limiting factors that do not allow for that generalization. But again, that's things that we can get into, more specifics that we can get into. So, quantitative research, large numbers, comparison of groups, before or after. When you start talking about experimental research, you're talking quantitative quite often, almost exclusively, but there's some exceptions to that. And then you have mixed method research. Mixed method is a combination in some format of quantitative and qualitative. You might have a qualitative piece that's exploratory that comes first, and then you launch into using quantitative assessments with a particular population. Or you might do a quantitative assessment and then you discover that you really want to get into the experience of a few individuals, and then you do qualitative, you do interviews with those exemplars or those particular individuals, and then you unfold their experience within your study. You can also do interviews along with assessments at the same time. So before, after, same time, there's a whole variety of combinations that you can do with mixed methods. But the point is that you're not just collecting one type of data set, you're collecting multiple types of data sets and trying to triangulate or look at a particular experience from different perspectives. All right. Each method that we discuss is going to have its own philosophical background, its own bent. Often we talk about this as the philosophy of science. This falls within the discussion, a larger discussion of philosophy of science. But each method also has its own historical bias and historical background. So when we start talking about hermeneutics, that hermeneutics comes from a particular background and use with particular textual analysis and whatnot. When we start talking about phenomenology, it comes from a particular philosophical background, and then it branched out. Different types of phenomenology branched out, and we're able to address different things, such as does when somebody has an experience of a phenomena, do they have a raw experience of it, or is everything interpreted? And as a researcher, do you have to deal with interpretations, or can you get at the raw experience of it? Anyway, I look forward to that conversation online as well. I have up here on the screen an example of rationalism, empiricism and radical empiricism, logical positivism. These are all philosophical things behind science, as well as the way that we approach the research method. When we start talking about William James's radical empiricism, what does that mean? What types of data are taken to be valid within radical empiricism? Now, this class isn't going to be a philosophy class, though. So these are terms that I'm throwing out that you may already be familiar with because of prior classes. And you may see them re-emerging here. But this conversation I'm having right now is mostly just to let you know that there is a tradition, there's a rich background behind each one of these research methods that we're going to discuss. And as you get into your doctoral studies, and really honing down what research method you're going to use, you will need to get into the philosophy and the history behind the research method that you're going to use, because that relates to why you choose a particular research method for the question that you're asking in your study. Two things in particular that you want to look out for as we go through this quarter. One is ontology, which is the worldview. And you want to continually ask the question, what is the worldview of the researchers? So, when a person comes from a particular belief about how reality is structured, they're going to ask research questions and look for data in a particular way. Examples that I gave up here are historical examples. There's there's a debate between what's called vitalism and atomism. The vitalists believed that there was something more that imbued physical matter with either spirit or some sort of energy, an animating energy. The atomists believed that you could break down physical reality into smaller and smaller parts, and that by doing that we'd be able to explain everything. And both of those beliefs then propagated through philosophy and philosophical history to influence the science that we have today. So when you're looking at asking a particular research question, because we are within science, we fall within the domain of science, right? So when we ask a particular research question and we look for a particular set of data, we have to be aware of what worldview we're holding as we ask those questions and look for the particular data. As an example, when somebody studies, let's say, near-death experiences. So a person, near-death experiences are those experiences that somebody might have when they come close to death. They might report, an individual might report after a cardiac event, feeling like they came out of their body and looked down at their body and then went towards a light, saw deceased relatives, had an experience, and then came back. So as a researcher, when I look at that type of experience, that narrative, there's different ontologies I might have when I approach that topic. One ontology may be very material in perspective, and it may, one belief is that the only thing that exists is physical reality. And so there must be an explanation within our physical reality for that type of experience. Most often, individuals will look towards the brain and neurological causes of that type of experience. Therefore, as a researcher, what you'd be doing is you'd be asking a question about what part of the brain caused this experience. What were the interactions? Maybe there was an interaction between oxygen levels within a person when they died, or but you're looking at physical explanations for that experience. And so that's going to impact your questions, it's going to impact the type of data that you're looking at. Again, it really starts with ontology. Another way to look at that is if you come more from, for example, a vitalist perspective, and you believe that spirit, in a very dualistic way, maybe spirit imbues, life force imbues the world we live in a person. So maybe a person has a soul. So if you're discussing the near-death experience with an experiencer, you may be holding that perspective in your background, so you may not necessarily look towards the neurological cause, but there may be a neurological correlation or an interaction between the vitalistic spiritual aspect within the physical, or you might be looking for some other type of data. But the point is that starting with the ontology, the belief about reality, that influences what you're going to look at in order to explain the phenomena, what data you're going to look at, what questions you're going to look at, etc. Similarly, epistemology. Epistemology asks the question, what type of knowledge and data are valued? What is it that, epistemology is the study of how we know things. So what is it that we're looking to? Do we recognize tacit or intuitive processes, or do we only focus on physical materialistic properties, positivistic properties? So again, it's a question to keep in mind as we're talking about the research methods, because each research method has a particular relationship to epistemology and ontology and even others like axiology and whatnot, but we probably won't get into those. Okay, so for this class, weeks 2 through 6 will be focused on qualitative methods, starting with intuitive inquiry, which was developed by Rosemary Anderson. Week 7 and 8 will be quantitative and experimental designs, and week 9 will be mixed methods. Each one of these areas will be covered later in your doctoral program in full classes. You're going to have a full class on qualitative research methods. You're going to have a full class on statistics and experimental design. Hopefully you will have a class on mixed methods, but that kind of depends on the year and who's teaching. But it would be good if you could get a class that's just focused on the different types of mixed methods and how to integrate mixed methods and work with them in a way that's appropriate. But for this class, we're just going to be covering them in a very overview manner, very broad spectrum, broad brushstroke manner, just to get you acquainted with the terms and get you familiar with the research methods. And that's it. I appreciate your attention, and I look forward to working with all of you online. Take care.